Hi, welcome to the first edition of OID's Coffee Talk Live. I'm Dr. Kendall Dees. I'm Director of Diversity Training and Grant Initiatives here at the Office of Institutional Diversity at the College of Charleston. Today we're focusing on the issue of civil rights, and we have two noted figures in the community that have devoted their life's work to this area. Joining us today for our first edition is Dr. Millicent Brown. Dr. Brown is a former faculty member at the College of Charleston. She's a graduate. She's also a civil rights consultant in the Charleston community. We also have Dr. John Hale. Dr. Hale is an associate professor of educational history in the Department of Teacher Education here at the College of Charleston. Thank you, Millicent and John, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Glad to be.
I think we would say that we'd all agree that the civil rights era was a pivotal period here in our country's history, and there were certainly lessons to be drawn from that. So I want to start off our conversation by asking the question, what are some of the lessons that we can draw from the civil rights era in America that can be applied to address challenges in higher education and other critical areas in the nation today? Millicent, we'll start with you.
Yeah, easy question, right? I think first and foremost we have to just caution people to be careful about defining what they mean by the civil rights era. I think almost the majority of people think immediately of the 50s and 60s, but I think it's important always to understand that the history of the country has been a civil rights movement. Just whether we're talking from colonial days literally to the present. And so time-wise, I think people need to be very cautious about trying to compress all of the initiatives for first-class citizenship by various groups and trying to compress that into this very short time frame. In terms of lessons learned, I'm going to throw out one that's just very important for me, and that is that we as a nation are not clear about how change occurs. And so it gets easy sometimes to identify individuals, you know, one or two or three, or even philosophies, and we don't examine their depth. And so one of the lessons I've taken in my lifetime has to do with understanding how many people it is that it takes to mobilize for change and to not get caught up in iconic figures and individuals. And then along with how many people can really move for change, also how long it takes to actually see some results.
Mm-hmm. John, what is your perspective on that?
No, and a lot to build on what Dr. Brown has mentioned. I think, you know, how we periodize the civil rights movement is important, especially when you're looking at Charleston. I mean, you can trace resistance to legal oppression, right, to the Stoner Rebellion and even before that. So they're looking at 18th century resistance, and this is a movement that has occurred for a long time. And look how far we are now, right? It's taken this long to get this far. So this now it takes a long movement, and we have to know that going to a march and holding the sign isn't going to lead to change. In fact, you may actually experience repercussions for doing that.
Absolutely.
You know, so you have to look at it from the long duration of history, this long arc of history that we have to consider with the civil rights movement. The civil rights, the classic phase of 50s and 60s was just one small part of a much longer movement. And I think something else that's absolutely crucial to learn too is the localized nature of the movement. It wasn't Dr. King coming to Charleston, for instance, or the big leaders of the movement that really mobilized people. It was people who were holding local positions at NAACP, for instance, like President, your father, Sheriff Brown, right? I'll correct me here, president, local branch president of the NAACP.
And then ultimately South Carolina.
Yeah, but started out in Charleston, right?
Absolutely, for many years.
And he's known to have mobilized local Charlestonians to desegregate, not only the schools, but the golf course and other aspects of Charleston. This is a local movement. I mean, people weren't waiting for Dr. King to come to Charleston in order to be mobilized. This was a local movement from that started from the bottom up. People to see that there were countless nameless people who were part of a movement, that we shouldn't wait for someone, or even, spend all kinds of money to bring in famous national leaders of what's seen as a movement to sort of start something at the local level. You really have to work with what you have, because history tells us that that is really the impetus behind the movement, are local people engaged in struggle at the local level.
And I've oftentimes heard the phrase that you should learn from what has happened in history. So when you think about those lessons, do you think there's certain things that happened during that course of history that we can learn from today in 2017?
Yeah, I think we're living now at a time where it's unbelievably clear that what you thought was change was not permanent. And I think that is one of the most important aspects of learning from the past, that if you don't defend and watch and protect very carefully circumstances, leaders, politicians, politics can change on you. And so in almost a naive way, many of us who were a part of earlier civil rights movements really thought that change was permanent, that we fixed this. This was done now, and we can move on to other aspects, if you will, or that we could kind of sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor. And so I think it's very important to anybody who's serious about transformational society that we understand that things can be taken away if they are not defended. You know?
Absolutely.
That's a really good point. And we even saw that under President Obama. His administration with the Voting Rights Act, right? And how much of that was repealed under his administration.
Exactly.
It wasn't that people were vigilant, people were, but it was also this that can't be taken away too.
And then I think, again, lessons to be learned. And it's trying not to say to young people to be negative or that it doesn't matter. It matters very much that they get involved. But I still think we have to be critical. We thought, for example, that the end of discrimination legally through integration was a way that we were going to finally come to grips with this nation's harsh past. And then we have now learned that, integration brought on its own set of challenges. All of a sudden now, integration didn't mean valuable forces from various communities coming together to grow together. It meant that which was black is not valid. And the only way to ascend to some kind of privileged status in the society is to move into white quarters, white halls of power, and to take on the accoutrements of what it means to be white in America. And that's a devastating misperception of what the goal was. Because to negate the value of one's own community by thinking that we got to get out of there and enter into this other world, and that's what success or progress means. That's really very, very disturbing.
Yes.
And just maybe to build up on that a little bit, to show that when you look at desegregation, it's not about putting a black student next to a white student to lead to success, and that's not necessarily what desegregation meant. I think in some ways the movement failed, or the architects behind desegregation failed to connect desegregation and the issues of quality education to larger systemic issues. So how does this relate to housing segregation, for instance, or housing or employment patterns? Right, it's part of a much larger system, and it's not an individual rights-based question necessarily. It has to deal with, yes, that individual, but how does he or she connect to this larger system? And if you only focus on the individual and getting that individual access, Well, that's not even half the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's still these larger institutional forces that have to be addressed
Right.
as well.
And then when we look at 2017, in the civil rights era, very much a black-white dichotomy and dimension there. We are in, when we think about diversity today, we have a broader dynamic other than just a black-white dialogue. So, but still, many of those lessons can be applied. Staying on that theme, I want to ask another question. Here at the College of Charleston, in our Office of Institutional Diversity, we care a lot about diversifying higher education. So we have our 10% plan here at the college to diversify the undergraduate population. We're having discussions about how to diversify faculty and staff here at this college. And so, building upon the lessons that we've begun talking about them, what is your vision for how to achieve greater diversity in American higher education based upon some of these lessons from the past?